Hello everyone and welcome to the Contemporary World Civilizations course. My name is Aysun Güneş and I'm your instructor for today's course. Today we'll be recapping Unit 5, which is about the Eastern Civilization. Before starting our unit, I want to give an information about this unit, which is so full of information. So you will see a lot of written information on the slides. So don't worry, you can check all the information from the slides, and you will learn what you want to learn at the end of the course. So let's start with the outcomes of the course. After completing this chapter, you'll be able to analyze the succession of societies within the Eastern Civilization during the agricultural period. I mean, Kievan Rus, Moscovy, and Czardom of Russia. And then you'll be able to characterize the evolution of the Russia and the USSR during the industrial period, as well as contemplate the future of the Eastern Civilization in its post-industrial stage. And thirdly, you will be able to locate the place of Ukraine in the Eastern Civilization and reflect on its development trajectory. And then you will be able to appraise the evolution of religious beliefs within the Eastern Civilization through the ages. And lastly, you'll be able to assess the development of other cultural practices within the realm of the Eastern Civilization. So let's start with a saying from Winston Churchill, and he referred to Russia by this saying. He said, Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And by saying this, he thinks that Russia is a mysterious country inside an enigma. So let's start with giving information about this Eastern civilization, which is a descendant of a Greco-Roman civilization, and it was born around mid-19th century. To better understand the evolution of the Eastern civilization, we will turn to the legacy of Alvin Toffler, an American philosopher of historical and societal development, who describes three types of societies based on the concept of civilization waves. On the first wave, we're talking about agrarian revolutions replaced nomadic tribes. And the second wave, we'll be talking about the industrial scale, production, distribution, media, and weaponry. And lastly, we'll be talking about the informational wave, modern post-industrial societies. The Eastern civilization during the agricultural period, we can say that since the creation of the primary chronicle in 1113 CE, the traditional explanation of the origin of the first East Slavic state is that the Slavs simply invited Scandinavians to rule over them, since even though their whole land is great and rich, there is no order in it. So the origin of the Eastern civilization is mostly about the Slavs. The Slavs appear in European history between the 3rd and 8th century CE. Their initial habitats could have been in the area between Vistula and Dnieper rivers. The predominantly agricultural tribes of East Slavs then found help and protection in an alliance with the Scandinavian warrior traders known as the Vikings. They established routes from the north along the rivers Dnieper, Don, and Volga to Byzantium, Arabia, and the Orient as early as in the 6th and 7th centuries CE. When we need to talk about Kievan Rus, we can say this was a powerful and prosperous East Slavic state which thrived under the reign of Ruriks from the 9th to the 18th century. The contemporary nations of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus perceive Kievan Rus as their cultural forerunner. According to a legend, the founder of the ruling family was the Viking Rurik of Scandinavia. The state was established on the backbone of the trade route of the Vikings to the Greeks, medieval water routes that connected Scandinavia and the Byzantine Empire along the river Dnieper, as well as other waterways. One of the Rurik's descendants, Prince Vladimir, converted his subjects into Orthodox Christian faith in 988. This was a powerful after the 12th century. The Kievan Principality declined even further due to the succession disputes, conflicts between regional princes, invasions from Asia, along with the collapse of the commercial ties between Byzantium and Europe via the Dnieper. So, Mongol invasion and the demise of the Kievan Rus, we can talk about three different kinds of countries. The first one is Novgorod Republic. Novgorod was a successful part on the eastern side of the Hanseatic League trade network, and its citizens reverently referred to their city-states as the Lord Novgorod the Great. The Grand Principality of Moscow originated within the Principality of Vladimir Suzdal when Prince Daniel I inherited a tiny timber citadel called Moscow in the mid-13th century. And the Czardom of Russia existed between the accession to the throne Ivan IV, later known as the Ivan the Terrible, in 1547, and the establishment of the Russian Empire by Peter I in the 1721st. So, the forces of this nomadic Mongol empire overran Kievan Rus in the 13th century, devastating many cities, including Kiev itself. Among other important consequences, the invasion precipitated the rise of the Grand Principality of Moscow. As we already know, starting in the 16th century, the territory of the Eastern civilization had significantly expanded. From 1551 to 1700, Russia annually added land about the size of Netherlands. During the reign of Tsar Ivan IV, the Russian Czardom already spanned an area twice as large as England, France, and Spain combined, from the headwaters to the Dnieper and the Volga rivers to the Ural Mountains. Russia expanded a lot, and there are several reasons for this expansion. The first reason is the landlocked nation needed the sea. So they try to get the countries by the sea. And then the ruling class of Russia was a land-rich society and aristocracy. Their expansion had some ideological underpinnings like Tsardom, Pan-Slavism, and later communism. And the last reason for their expansion was that their expansion was sometimes accidental. So when you look at this photo here, the Russian social pyramid is given. As you see, there are classes in this social community. At the very bottom of this pyramid, you can see the poor peasants, farm workers. There is the middle class and Tsarist military officers, and as you see, the Russian Orthodox Church, the religious men, and at the top of this pyramid, you can see the elite of Russian people like Tsarian family and aristocrats. So economically speaking, the empire was still largely an agricultural nation, and as you see, the working class was ruthlessly exploited, and the peasantry, despite the recent evolution of serfdom, notoriously oppressed. The Russian Revolution and the creation of the USSR, and we can see the Russian evolution in different phases. The first phase is the old regime before 1905. The Tsarist government opposed a rapid political change while encouraging the country's industrialization. This explosive combination ensures that, driven by the irresistible forces of modernization, the cumbersome juggernaut of the empire is now hurtling toward self-destruction. And second phase is moderate phase. It's between 1905 and 1917. The 1905 Bloody Sunday massacre of a peaceful demonstration in St. Petersburg triggered nationwide strikes, which paralyzed the economy. Next World War I created a crisis of such proportions that the monarchy couldn't meet the challenge. And in February 1917, Nicholas II abdicated, ending a 300-year rule of the Romanov dynasty. In April, Lenin armed a radical faction of the Social Democratic Party, the Bolsheviks, with a consistent plan of action to which they adhered unremittingly. And the third phase is the radical phase. It's between 1917 and 1921. This period, which coincide with the whole duration of the civil war in Russia, began with the seizure of power by the Bolsheviks, and it involved an armed power struggle with the Bolsheviks and several rival groups. And last phase is the Thermidor. It's between 1921 and 1982, and Thermidor in Russia has been complicated and prolonged, Crane-Brinton says. Perhaps it would be logical to divide the long Russia Thermidor into several stages, such as Stalin's phase, Khrushchev's phase, and the Brezhnev's phase. So, as it comes to Soviet Union, we can say that it existed from 1922 to 1991. After Lenin's death in 1924, dictatorial powers were assumed by his successor, Joseph Stalin. The ruthless and calculating dictator suppressed his political opponents, introduced his own crude version of Marxism and Leninism, and launched a centrally planned, dubiously financed, and forcefully executed command economy. The nation underwent a period of rapid industrialization, which was accompanied by a brutal collectivization of peasants into factory-like communes called kolkhozy and sovkhozy between 1928 and 1940. Stalin also initiated a great purge, somewhat analogous to the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. As a result, hundreds of thousands were sentenced to hard labor in correctional labor camps. They were called gulags, or they were sent to death. And the failure of the outdated Marxism-Leninism ideology to cope with mounting pressures of the rapidly change along the lines of post-industrialization world created powerful socio-cultural strains. Starting in Poland, the wave of the revolutions of 1989 removed the Soviet Union with its basis in communist doctrine and its huge international system from the arena of history by the end of 1991. And as we talk about Ukraine, which we can say a stage of the Eastern civilization with a different fate, Ukraine is a historic land with a unique and rich culture, one which displays influences of many civilizations. Despite the ever-present pressure of the cultural conversion from various colonial powers, the Ukrainian culture, art, and literary language underwent a process of rapid development and refinement, especially during the 19th and the 20th century. The first attempt to gain status of an independent state arrived in 1970 when the Declaration of Independence on 23rd of June in 1917 led to the appearance from 1917 to 1921 of the predecessor of modern Ukraine, the Ukrainian People's Republic. On 24th of August 1991, the Act of Declaration of the Independence of Ukraine was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, and it re-established Ukraine as an independent state. However, things didn't go smoothly as they wished or as they planned. The Orange Revolution erupted between late November 2004 and January 2005. It was a series of protests and political events that took place in the aftermath of the runoff vote of the 2004 Ukrainian presidential election, which had been marred by corruption, intimidation, and fraud. And the results of this Orange Revolution, however, were largely cancelled by subsequent 10 years of fighting between the moderates of various political branches. The economy was paralyzed, as we can guess, by the oligarchs' warfare, permeating corruption, and internal discord. So there is a word in this chapter that we need to focus. It was Euromaidan. On the night of 21st of November 2013, the Euromaidan burst into existence. It was a wave of demonstrations and civil unrest which surged first in Kiev and then in other cities. The Euromaidan protests turned bloody with over 100 protesters sacrificing their lives in February of 2014. Starting in April 2014, a wave of the pro-Russian demonstrations surged in a dozen of eastern and southern Ukrainian cities. Those soon escalated in the siege of the government buildings and calls for seceding from Ukraine and joining Russia. Diplomatic talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States and the European Union in Geneva failed to achieve any meaningful results. However, they resumed in Minsk, Belarus in 2014 and 2015. The evolution of religious beliefs within the Eastern civilization through the ages has been gradual and has passed through a number of periods. The East Slavic early religious beliefs were animistic. Animism perceives all things, for example, animals, plains, rocks, rivers, as animated and alive. Gradually, however, the Eastern civilization formed its identity around a mystical faith that arrived from the Byzantine Empire, today called Orthodox Christianity. Presently, Russian Orthodoxy is undergoing a religious revival. Other religions, such as Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism, are important in Russian history as well. And when we need to talk about the development of other cultural practice within the realm of the Eastern civilization, we can say that being a core country of the Eastern civilization, Russia has a rich and distinguished, even if at times a tormented history of accomplishments in many fields of culture, particularly in politics and philosophy, literature and cinema, classical music and ballet, and architecture and painting. The country also has an impressive material culture and long-standing tradition in science and technology. The conversion of Kievan Rus to Orthodox Christianity in 988 CE largely defined the culture of the Eastern civilization in the next millennium as the synthesis of Slavic and Byzantine traditions. And lastly, at different points in its history, the Eastern civilization was also strongly influenced by the culture of the Western civilization, of course. The process of cultural evolution in Russia inevitably reflected those dynamics, receiving expression in two great perennial conflicts of the Russian culture. The one is between creative artists and the authorities, and the other between Westernizers and Slavophiles. Thank you for listening to our course.